Maria had always been the loudest in the room. Her laughter was contagious, her voice bold, and her presence impossible to ignore. People admired her confidence, the way she could fill a space with her energy, and how she always had something to say. To Maria, silence was a void that needed to be filled, an emptiness that made her uncomfortable. But there was a part of her, deep down, that felt restless despite all the noise she created. She just didn't know it yet. At 32, Maria worked as a marketing manager for a busy advertising firm in the heart of the city. Her days were filled with meetings, presentations, phone calls, and endless conversations. It was the kind of high-energy environment she thrived in. And for years, she had built her career on her ability to communicate, persuade, and speak with confidence. Her colleagues admired her ability to take charge, to always know what to say, and to steer the conversation in her favor. But recently, Maria had been feeling exhausted. It wasn't just the workload or the pressure to perform, it was something deeper. She found herself constantly drained by the end of the day, not just physically, but mentally. No matter how much she talked, how many meetings she led, or how many phone calls she made, there was a growing sense of unease that she couldn't shake. She didn't know why, but she was beginning to feel overwhelmed by the very noise she had once embraced. One Friday afternoon, after a particularly grueling week, Maria found herself at her desk, staring blankly at her computer screen. Her mind was buzzing with thoughts, her inbox overflowing with messages, and her calendar filled with back-to-back meetings. She took a deep breath and rubbed her temples, trying to shake off the fatigue that had settled in her bones. Just then, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was from her friend Lisa, who had recently returned from a week-long retreat. The message was simple: "You should try this sometime." Total silence. "It's life-changing." Maria stared at the message, confused. Silence? How could that be life-changing? Lisa was the last person Maria expected to embrace something like that. She was a social butterfly, always out with friends, always chatting. But now, here she was, suggesting silence as a cure for what exactly? Intrigued but skeptical, Maria decided to call Lisa and find out more. "Lisa, what's this about a silence retreat? You of all people, sitting quietly for days?" Maria laughed. Lisa's voice on the other end of the line was calm, almost serene. "I know, it sounds crazy, right? But honestly, it's the best thing I've ever done. It's not just about not talking, it's about finding peace in the quiet. You learn to really listen to yourself, to your thoughts. It's hard to explain, but it gave me so much clarity. You should give it a try." Maria couldn't imagine sitting in silence for even a few hours, let alone days. She thrived on interaction, on conversation, on filling the air with her thoughts and opinions. But something in Lisa's voice made her pause. There was a calmness there, a centeredness that Maria realized she hadn't felt in a long time. After much deliberation, Maria decided to take the plunge. She booked a weekend retreat at a center known for its silent meditation practices. It was a small, peaceful place, nestled in the mountains, far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The idea of being alone with her thoughts, without her phone, without any distractions, both terrified and intrigued her. When she arrived at the retreat, Maria was greeted by a smiling woman who handed her a schedule. The rules were simple: no talking, no phones, no outside communication. It was a place to reflect, meditate, and find peace in the quiet. There were designated times for silent group meditation, walking in the woods, and personal reflection. Maria felt out of place from the moment she walked in. The silence was deafening. The absence of sound made her feel exposed, as if the quietness was an invitation for all her thoughts to come rushing to the surface. She was used to filling every moment with words, with activity, with noise. But here, there was nothing but stillness. That first night, as she lay in bed in her small, simple room, Maria's mind was racing. She couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about work, about all the emails she wasn't answering, about the meetings she was missing. Her mind buzzed with to-do lists, unfinished projects, and nagging thoughts. The silence around her only seemed to amplify the noise in her head. But as the days went by, something began to shift. The constant chatter in her mind, while still present, began to soften. The silence that had once felt suffocating started to feel more like a space to breathe. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Maria wasn't distracted by the outside world. There were no phone calls to answer, no conversations to keep up with, no meetings to attend. She was alone with her thoughts, and slowly, she began to notice things she had never paid attention to before. On the third day, Maria took a walk through the woods surrounding the retreat. The quiet was profound, no sound but the rustle of leaves, the chirping of birds, the gentle breeze brushing against her skin. As she walked, she noticed how her mind had started to slow down. The constant buzzing of thoughts had faded into the background, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly present. With each step, Maria became more aware of her surroundings. She noticed the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, casting soft patterns on the ground. She listened to the rhythm of her footsteps, the crunch of leaves beneath her feet. There was a stillness within her, a peace that she had never known. She realized that in all her years of talking, of filling the silence with words, she had missed out on truly listening to herself, to the world around her, and to the quiet wisdom that silence brings. As the retreat came to an end, Maria felt a profound sense of clarity. The silence had been uncomfortable at first, but now she didn't want it to end. She had discovered that silence wasn't a void. It was a space where she could hear her own thoughts more clearly, where she could connect with a deeper part of herself that had been drowned out by the noise of everyday life. When she returned to the city, Maria was determined to bring this newfound sense of peace with her. She knew she couldn't escape the noise of the world. Entirely, her job was demanding, her life busy, but she realized that silence wasn't just about the absence of sound. It was about creating space for herself, even in the midst of chaos. She started small. Every morning, before she checked her phone or rushed off to work, Maria took 10 minutes to sit in silence. She would close her eyes, breathe deeply, and simply be. At first, her mind would still race, but over time, she learned to let the thoughts pass without getting caught up in them. She found that starting her day in silence gave her a sense of calm that carried through even the busiest of days. At work, Maria also noticed a shift. She had always been the first to speak in meetings, the one to offer ideas and solutions before anyone else. But now, she found herself listening more. Instead of rushing to fill the silence, she allowed space for others to speak, to share their thoughts. She realized that in her eagerness to be heard, she had often missed out on truly hearing others. One afternoon, during a particularly stressful meeting, Maria's boss asked for her input on a major project. Normally, she would have jumped in with her usual enthusiasm, eager to contribute, but instead, she paused. She took a deep breath, let the silence settle, and gave herself a moment to think. When she finally spoke, her words were measured and thoughtful. To her surprise, the room responded differently. People listened more intently, and her ideas carried more weight. Maria realized that silence had given her the power to be more deliberate, more intentional with her words. In the quiet, she had found her voice. Over time, Maria's relationship with silence deepened. She no longer feared the quiet moments. Instead, she welcomed them as opportunities for reflection, for connection, and for clarity. She understood now that silence wasn't something to be avoided or filled. It was a source of strength, a way to tap into her inner wisdom and listen to the world around her in a deeper, more meaningful way. The power of silence had transformed Maria's life. It had taught her that in the stillness, there is space for growth, for understanding, and for true connection. Silence, she realized, wasn't the absence of something. It was the presence of everything she had been missing.